Hello and welcome to another episode of FinTech Focus TV with me, Toby Babb, and today I am absolutely delighted to be joined by Ian Horne from Money20. Ian, how are you?
I'm very well, Toby. I'm woefully underdressed.
Oh, do you know what? I had a meeting today, otherwise I would be joining you in the same sort of thing, so you're looking very sharp, very sharp. It's FinTech after all, isn't it?
Yeah, I like to think so, but I can never get it right. So, yeah.
Listen, lovely to have you on. We've been speaking about this for a little while when we spoke about it. Money2020 is one of the standout events and shows in the I guess the fintech community. Yeah. There is a legacy, a legend that sort of has a mythology that's sort of created around it. We're going to get into all of that. We're going to talk about what's happening this year's show. We're going to be talking a little bit about what's happened before, who's coming on board, why people should come, the whole process of getting on board with it, lots and lots of pieces in between. But before we do that, give us a little bit of background about yourself and Money2020.
Absolutely. I'll start with myself, seeing as you listed in that order. So I'm the EU head of content at Money2020, so I'm responsible for staging the content and kind of going through the call for content applications, picking speakers, but also outreaching to people we want on our stages. Before that, I was a networker. I led the UK audience development team at a financial publisher called Citywire, where I also had a wealth tech podcast and a newsletter. I'm also an author, so I wrote a book about decentralized finance that launched about 2 years ago. So just very fascinated in all things finance.
You can do it all.
I try. I mean, as like anyone who's in the kind of events and kind of journalism space, you don't obviously practice it in the field like that, but yeah. I know enough to kind of talk about things. Intellectually curious, I think, is what I would say. My academic background was sociology, to be honest. Okay. So I think that's a slightly different approach into finance, but it kind of colours my analysis and the way I do things. So that's kind of me. I mean, I was also a journalist for years, but Money2020 is the big thing and probably what everyone wants to hear about here. So June 3rd to the 5th.
Don't say that.
It's fake humility, don't worry. June 3rd to the 5th is the event, or 3rd to the 5th, if I could say that correctly. Yeah. And we're in Amsterdam, and as you say, it's a huge event. I mean, I've been with the company 2.5 years, and I'm not just promoting it here, but when you're part of it, it does feel like you're part of something special. So we're basically the biggest independent event for fintech, banking and payments. We attract about 9,000 people every year to the RAI. And yeah, it's amazing. And that doesn't even account for all the people at side events who create their own thing. So the ecosystem that we bring to Amsterdam for 3 or 4 days of the year is really quite something.
Amsterdam loves you.
Yeah, I think so. we must bring in enough money, so they should love us at this point. But the thing we're trying to do, and I believe we deliver, is the best event in fintech. We really are trying to provide not just the information and knowledge that will help you drive your career and your business to the next level, but also an experience.
I think that experience thing is really interesting, isn't it? Because as I say, historically, I know Nadia's been out from our business, but I've been an outsider looking in, and vibrant is the sort of thing, isn't it? When you look at it there and you see the detail and the things that you're doing to do that, I think it's so important because there are so many shows. I think in 2020 there was a lot of questioning whether events were going to come back in the same sort of form. It feels to me like they've come back even thicker and faster. The finance space and fintech space has a lot of different events, and standing out from the crowd is doing that. To get 9,000 people to Amsterdam obviously means that something's happening. It seems to get bigger and brighter every single year. I want to come on to your job in content at the moment, because that seems to be, I imagine that to be one of the most challenging jobs of all of them.
Not a paramedic,
but coming back to the I think there's always levels, isn't there?
Sorry, didn't help myself.
Air traffic control, content for events.
Right.
But coming back to the whole thing about keep on raising the bar, tell us about how you do that and what some of the things that have really stood out and what people talk about, why people talk about Money2020 and the visual side of it all, because it is a stunning event.
Yeah, and I definitely feel that. For me, it's being part of a team. So you're right, content is my role, but there is a whole process and a wider team that makes the whole thing amazing. So right now we have senior leadership putting together a regulatory summit or a policy summit that's happening behind closed doors, which is going to allow some of the leading central banks and regulators to actually genuinely shape policy. That kind of stuff's amazing. We have a creative team who's one of the, I think they're industry leading in what they do. So every stage that we have comes to life and has a different function. We've got, last year we had a stage, the nature stage, which was surrounded by plants and greenery, but it was so beautiful and everyone loved it. I was emailed by someone actually asking if they were allowed to take some of the plants with them when they left, which I had to politely decline. We had them on loan, but we do all sorts of things to make things different. There are events. I mean, we've all been to the kind of stale, tired financial services event where there's no effort put into the stands, there's nothing that's going to grab your attention, but we try to make everything exciting, whether that's even the sponsors themselves putting really exciting functions into their booths, all the way through to the stages being great, to we often have things like, one year at the show we had a merch booth, and the idea was we gave people that went to the event last year will have seen this. Or we gave out coins for people to basically, when they were awarded one for whatever purpose, they could put it into the machine and receive something free.
Nice.
Now, one out of every, I think, 10 or 20 of those resulted in a brass band coming out and like serenading. Just completely, it's about, you wouldn't expect that at a payments or a banking show. The idea is to, yes, don't get me wrong, we're delivering, top level insight. We want the biggest speakers, the CEOs, the senior strategists, they're all there, but it's trying to make that whole environment fun. And as you were saying, that COVID feels like a long time ago, and this whole what's going to happen for events, in a way I think we've all realized that we actually love seeing each other and being in person, not all the time maybe, but for 3 or 4 days of the year, or however many events you go to, there is something really magical about putting an ecosystem together and having really talented, brilliant people who work around a similar mission. I think in payments, banking, fintech, you see that. There's something special about it. So I'm glad that's back, and I'm glad we do it in a different way.
I definitely think so, and I think that thought process of making it different, making it stand out, and creating those sort of wow moments are so important at the moment with it all as well. So you can you have those memories of where something like the brass band happens, or these different bits and pieces. I want to touch on that content piece, so the paramedics, the air traffic controllers, and content creators. To sort of justify that sort of aspect, right? There's a lot of pressure to come into it, because an event is only as good as the content is, and hopefully you can bring people together and create great networking opportunities, and people go to that. But you've also got people there who want to come and listen to engaging content. Now, I think when you look at a number of different things, you can kind of almost tick straight away what's going to be on them and know what the conversations are at a lot of the events which you go to. So as someone there who is responsible for making it interesting and fresh, rather than sort of the 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, 5.0, the same thing regurgitated, how do you go about that? And also, well, actually, no, we'll start with that question. I won't layer it up.
Yeah, I always do that when I interview people. I always have 3 questions at once. It's a challenge, right? I think there's a mixture. You look for fresh content. You don't have the same speakers every year. You don't have the same topics every year. But you do need a mixture. I think some topics are kind of longitudinal. If you're going to talk about the evolution of cross-border payments, which is obviously fundamental to our industry, that is something that you may have variations on the theme over a period of time. That's acceptable, but that can't be the whole show, as you say. You can 2.0 and 3.0 it to death, and no one wants that. So it's about finding new ways to put people together, taking people out of their comfort zone a bit, pairing speakers who maybe weren't expecting to be put together. That can happen, but also formatting as well. One thing we have at the show this year is the off-the-record stage. So this is a stage where you've got no reporters allowed in, no filming, no writing, no notes, no anything, no phones. We'll take it all from you. But the idea there is you have a really candid conversation from someone who's an industry heavyweight, either telling you a story that you'll find interesting or giving you some insight that you'll find, fresh and relevant.
And how do people feel about handing their phones over?
Well, no one ever loves doing that. There is always someone that tries to sneak something through. We're very strict.
Does it become a stage which people want to, or an arena which people want to go into then?
I think it really depends. I think there's some content that really fits it and other content that doesn't. I think it can be a trickier sell. To be completely candid, I think if you're a marketing person, you might be immediately hesitant. Like, why am I going on this intimate stage that doesn't have outward press content? I think you have to have the right people using that stage.
Yeah.
But that's a programming challenge, and that's fine if people aren't willing to tell the message like we want to tell it. It's not going to land. So we do find enough people to tell really, really fascinating stories, and it works that kind of thing that you probably wouldn't want to go public. But that's the magic of it. And again, you're going to an event.
House room.
Well, exactly that. And you're going to an event. It's a one-off thing. What can you get that you wouldn't get on a webinar, that you wouldn't be able to read about in a paper? That kind of stuff. So that's exactly what we're going for. There are so many ways that we try and make the content kind of fresh and relevant. It's having the best people speaking at the right time, constantly reading industry news and kind of figuring out what's new and what's happening. I could go on.
Wax on for a while about it. And so you could go on, because I know how many people apply to this and that makes it a really interesting piece. So when you have, I think you said something like 3,000 applications and 200 to 300 speakers, I think you were talking about within that. That's a lot of people to disappoint over that sort of phase. It's also a lot to read and work out who's best and where it goes. So talk to us about the process of that. And I will ask this in two questions. So number one is, how do you decide who's going to be on that, and how do you work out the sort of the filtration process to get into it? And number two is what can people do to really make sure they do catch your eye and do have you sitting up and saying, we need to have that person speaking? Yeah,
actually a lot of it speaks to your previous question about how keeping the content fresh, right? So the whole process is lengthy, probably lengthier than people realise. If I'd submitted an application and a month later I hadn't heard back, I'd be thinking, what's going on? But if you've done my job or a similar job, you'll probably realise what goes on. So every year, the months prior to our call for content, we're doing outreach. We're looking to engage with people who we think have a real story to tell and get some speakers booked in early. But then once that call for content lands, we get, this year it was about 1,000 applications and about 3,000 speakers attached to it. I mean, I'm going roughly, I haven't actually totted the numbers up, but it's in that ballpark.
Yeah, it's incredible.
So I mean, the team and I, we look at every single one of them, and even the attached documents that come with it. It takes time. But then once you've done that, there's some content that leaps out at you that's so good, you're like, that's getting booked. But it really helps to act fast and slow, because sometimes the thing that immediately seems amazing, you then get to the end of reading the applications and all of a sudden you've got 2 or 3 things that are competing with it. And you need to, there's also a degree of categorization. We need enough subject, enough sessions on each subject. We also want speaker diversity. We want a story that tells, the actual, gives a picture of fintech, but the whole picture. So we're piecing things together. It's in many ways like a jigsaw puzzle. So there are some things that get onboarded very quickly, but then once you're past that phase, it's really hard not to be precious about it. And then to the rejections piece, my God, I mean, every year I try and make a point of giving people advice on how to apply. We run content clinics, we do, I occasionally do webinars, I occasionally speak at other events and talk through that. And I've honestly created a rod for my own back, because people create great content. And you've got marketing teams and content teams dedicated to putting things forward for the show. Some of the stuff I reject is amazing. Some of the stuff I reject genuinely would walk into any other fintech show. And I've said this before, but the B-sides of Money 2020 would make a hell of a show. So the thing, as I say, a lot of the time things miss out for not arbitrary reasons, but really minor reasons. Like there's just something on the topic that's slightly better or slightly more relevant, or that speaker spoke last year, so we want to freshen it up, or we want more geographical variants, and we've got, that kind of stuff can make a difference. So, but to speak of the stuff that's really, really great, I mean, we want the right people speaking about the right topics at the right time. That's really key. And that's fluid and that changes. And the other thing is, and I bang on about this, here's my attempt to make a thing. ROA, return on attendance. If you're going to put forward a session, what is the audience getting from that? I always think there has to be an element of that.
Of course.
Because thought leadership is nice. People discussing, I could get 4 really clever people talking about AI and what they think is going to happen. It's all right, but for the best fintech show in the world, that's my remit. I don't need that. I need industry leaders telling me how they're applying it and what they're doing. If someone's going to give me an opinion piece, it needs to be someone who's really moving the dial. So, there needs to be something actionable. How is this session improving a professional's life, How is it improving a business?
Yeah.
So these are the kind of things that we look for. And sometimes you can tick 9 out of 10 boxes and still not get selected.
Still not get there. Yeah. Then it's just your luck, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's
So
something.
I am at that phase right now. I'm sending a lot of rejections to a lot of very talented, very spectacular people, which is a strange feeling. I'm a reluctant gatekeeper.
Yeah.
But honestly, I think that's probably is a good thing.
Surely you can just let AI do it these days.
Gee, can you imagine? Can you imagine? No, I could never, but yeah.
I know you mean.
Yeah.
I know you mean. So that gives you this luxury of having a show which is going to be jam-packed with really relevant, high caliber content. So coming back to that and circling back to it and saying what's coming up in June, tell me some of the things you're excited about sharing with people.
Yeah, some great speakers. I mean, we've got the CEO of ING speaking. I'm really excited for that. And talking about sustainability, I think banks have a really interesting conversation around sustainability. Obviously, there are these net zero targets. Speaking in full millennial, I don't think they're ambitious enough.
Yeah.
I think, you look at the way climate change is going, none of this is great. But then Stephen van Rijswijk, I think, is an interesting voice in trying to move ING forward and kind of chairing the sustainability committee and the various work that he does. You can definitely look at ING or any major bank and say we're not moving fast enough. But I think it's really interesting that that's a topic that he was really keen to lead on. Yeah. So I'm fascinated to see what he says. We've got other.
And that's what they pushed as well.
Yeah. They really wanted to talk about that. And
nice.
I know there are, there's loads of angles you can take. Sustainability obviously is a very kind of challenging topic to get into, but I'm intrigued to see how that pans out, and I'm glad they want to talk about that. Other topics that we have, we've got Yoni Assia, the CEO of eToro, speaking. They just announced, I don't know when this will come out relative to me saying it, but an IPO has just been announced, so that's absolutely fascinating. But moreover, the wealth tech piece is fascinating. We can talk about AI, but AI is kind of the plumbing that is making a load of different things come to the fore. Now, wealth technology is my former remit, and I can absolutely see how personal finance, investing, and all these other things that kind of tie into that are hugely relevant. And then, there's a real convergence. A lot of things that were buzzy a few years ago are actually materially becoming part of the ecosystem. And I was saying I wrote a book about decentralized finance. Stable coins is one major thing. Blockchain in international payments is really developing. We have great speakers coming through on that. I can't quite announce them because they're currently going through the onboarding process, but that will be fascinating. We've got banks that want to talk about digital assets, and which is great, isn't it? That is honestly, some of the major banks are the ones leading on it, especially the cross-border banks. Like Citi and Standard Chartered are always keen to speak about these topics, which I find really fascinating. Then you've also got, from the DeFi world, we're announcing. By the time this news was broken by the time this comes out, but Charles Hoskinson, the CEO of Cardano, and also co-founder of Ethereum, is going to be one of our keynotes. Incredible. And I just think it's amazing that there's going to be a day of the show which is going to open with early doors of a session with Stephen van Rijswijk, and it's then going to finish with Charles Hoskinson. That's that TradFi DeFi convergence, isn't it? Absolutely. And it's just really interesting how these worlds are colliding. But you're seeing this with fintech. Fintech is getting into everything. Retailers and merchants are the obvious route. So we've got a mixture of big names. We've got a few other announcements that are yet to come that that will have broken by the time this comes out. But I can't, I have to keep under wraps for obvious reasons. But I'm hoping for a mixture of genuine industry heavyweights. You're hearing from the right companies and the right people, mixed with some things that are editorially fascinating that really make you sit back and take notice. So the content's going to do that value add for everyone who's there. We know it's going to have lots of little magic touches and bits and pieces around it. I always think that these sort of things are just as much as the content, just as much as the sort of ability to sell from the stands, etc., as they're getting the right people together. There is an enormous part of this about connectivity and connection and making sure that people can go in there and expand their networks. How do you manage that? So we have an app for that, which is, every event has an app, I think now, but I think ours is, the Rolodex you get, if that's a term anyone understands. Oh man, I think it lives on. I think it does, I was a networker in the days of business cards, which still kind of just about linger on, but just about. But I would always give this advice to people. This isn't my remit, but if you prep before an event, especially a major event, you can add so much value to what you're doing, because people often, on the content side, people add content to their calendars 48 to 24 hours before the show. I see that. I've seen the numbers on that. People plan late, but they do at least plan a bit. With networking, you can't actually be that lax, because if you're trying to speak to the most important contact to you, chances are another 20 people have requested a meeting as well.
Yeah, of course.
And you can't also assume that someone's going to be at the show for the full 3 days. So you need to get in early. So I would always say to people, download the app, keep tabs on it, and as soon as you're able to, start booking meetings in, because there are loads of great meeting spaces. You're going to get great opportunities to meet people, but it requires a coordinated effort. I think the challenge for speakers and senior leaders is they often don't have time to do this. You probably want someone on your team taking that app for you and setting those meetings up for you, or at least doing them on your behalf. But plan ahead, take your time, be targeted, and you won't run out of things to do. And again, I mean, we talk about content is, I think in many ways content's the heartbeat of the show, but we're competing against networking all the time, and that's amazing. That's a great challenge. And actually, I think it keeps us honest, because if I'm going to run a great session, it needs to be so good that you're not in the
not going to want to leave.
Exactly. So
I never thought about that. So you've got the two tribes in the individual. I want to keep you in the room. I want to get you out there.
Absolutely, and I think that competition actually makes everyone stronger. So main thing is just be prepped. Check the app. See who's coming. Like really make use of that. But we also look at audience profiles. There are people that turn up to the event purely to network, and there are people that turn up primarily for content. And we're catering to everyone.
And tell me about that profile. So who comes to the event? What sort of people will people find there?
Yeah, I mean, generally it's senior professionals from major banks, internationally, payments companies. There's a lot of scale-ups attend. A decent number of startups too, because we have initiatives for startups as well. There are all sorts of functions for going there. I mean, in the last few years, it's been really interesting seeing how the VC funding has kind of diminished relative to 2021 levels. I'd just say they're more sober now. I wouldn't say it was like a tight time or anything like that. But that's actually driven a need for partnerships and M&A activity. So we're generally dealing with like mid-level to very senior, with a skew towards senior. I think about a third of our audience is C-suite or founders. So you're spending your time with some serious people, and it's a serious commitment coming to the event. People give up serious time for it. So it's a chance. It's slightly different region by region. Everyone that knows Money 2020 will know we have the Vegas show, the Europe show, and the Asia show. There are slightly different angles. In Vegas, for instance, we get people signing term sheets there. You get investments actually done at the show. Europe is more European. We meet and we discuss doing that, which I prefer, obviously. But you do get these incredible meetings, and that Vegas mentality does come over a bit, because we're an international audience. So.
I mean, I think it has that sort of Vegas feel to it, doesn't it? When I look around and see the images, it could be Vegas or Amsterdam.
But we've had some incredible client stories over the years. There's some where, admittedly I forget the name of the business, but we put this out in marketing in the past. There's businesses that come close to running out of funding, and then they meet the next big investor at the show, or they manage to get their message across in the right way. So it is one of those things. Yes, it's an investment that comes to the show of time and money, but it's a great ecosystem to be in.
I think that's such an important thing, isn't it? Because I've spoken to a few people over this week so far, and there's a word that keeps on popping up, which is fortune. So people being fortunate about this, or luck, or whichever way you want to put it. And I'm listening to them talking about this luck, this perceived luck of the right thing happening at the right time, or what have you. And the more I sort of decode it, the more it's really obvious that this is about putting yourself in the position to do these sort of things. So the thing I love about events is you go there, whilst you can be prepared and meet people, and I see some people do some fascinating. I was particularly inspired a few years ago when I met up with a sales director of a business I knew relatively well, and he showed me their sort of lineup, their plan of the team. They had these briefing meetings with like a huddle beforehand, and they knew exactly where everyone was going, and they maximised it. It was the first time I thought, actually, do you know what, we go into these shows in a much more social sort of manner without expectations, and actually when you do it properly, it's incredible. But when you're looking at these sort of things, and you do go to these events, and you do start to put yourself out there, and you do start to meet people and introduce yourself to people, there are some phenomenal returns from it, right? And that's exactly what you're talking about. That can be nearly going bust, and then finding the next sort of way for you, through to finding new people to join your team, through to finding new people to do business with. It's such great energy around it as well, right?
And then we also follow some of these companies through their evolution.
Yeah.
You know, there are some, I think for this year, a good example is Infuse, who years ago, long before I joined the company, you know, started with a small booth at the show. Now they're one of our major sponsors, I believe. So, but that grows. It's a gradual thing. But you see people that, you know, end up becoming industry titans, industry leaders. But you know, you can. There are people that no doubt remember them kind of hustling on a stand or a booth at the show.
Exactly. Yeah.
But again, like you say, I think you've got to. I'm so used to football kind of terminology. I used to be a football coach, but you've got to buy a ticket to win the raffle, right? So there's luck. But
raffle's close enough to football stuff.
But that's a term people always use. For when you do something speculative, and actually, you have to be in the room to give yourself that chance.
Absolutely. So coming back to let's talk about the value for. Someone to come in there, turn up on the day, someone for a delegate to go out to Money 2020, to someone to get a standard booth, for someone to be on the stage. What's the pitch for them on that? Why do people need to be there?
Yeah, I mean, it's where the industry is. 3 or 4 days of the year is where everyone is, and if you're, whatever partner you're looking for, whatever kind of next step you're looking for your business, there are probably countless people in that room, in that environment, who can help you take things to the next level. And there's also, an element of best practice sharing and things like that. We endeavour to make sure that the content that we have gives you the best insight from the best people. I think we all want to learn. We're all interested in what our peers are doing. We'd all benchmark everything if we could, but there's a good chance to really be part of the story. And again, when it comes to featuring on stage, it's a conversation opener. It will get you through doors. And there's also, media attends. There's great press coverage for the show, for the leading speakers.
You do the pods on stage there as well, don't you?
Absolutely. And that's it. Even if you're not part of the main agenda, as you say, there are loads of podcasts. Actually, we bring some podcasts into our Money Pot booth as well, which is great. I mean, that is part of the main agenda. We have programming at all sorts of places, and people bring their own podcasts and bring their own kind of video cameras and so on. It's being part of the conversation, and I think if you put yourself out there, then obviously that there are benefits to be had from that.
Absolutely.
So it's funny though, the pitch varies in each region. So in America they call it the Super Bowl of FinTech, which I love.
I love that as well.
I just don't know how well it translates, but it's
I think it translates. I think everyone will get that. It's a brilliant way of putting it as well. So if people want to come to the Super Bowl of FinTech, it's in June. Remind me the dates.
June 3rd to the 5th.
June 3rd to the 5th in Amsterdam.
Yes.
What's the best way for people to find out a little bit more about it?
Head straight to our website. That's a man who's been manning a content inbox for weeks. Money2020.com. There's there's microsites for each region. So Europe, Asia, US. Asia's in late April if anyone's got a big Asian market. Again, the US is October. And they're all amazing events. They really are. And I think as the world becomes more global, there's lots we can learn from different regions.
And you do the content for all of them, do you?
No, just Europe for me. I have more grey hairs.
I was going to say, if you're doing that there.
But there are awesome people that program the content across the shows. So,
Absolutely outstanding. Well, listen, you've heard it there first. We hope to see you in Amsterdam for the show. Thanks for watching. Ian, thanks for coming on board.
Thanks, Toby. Pleasure.
And we'll see you on the next episode of FinTech Focus TV. Thanks a lot.